Let's get this.
But yeah, we'll probably.
All right. Hey, everyone. Wow, this is a packed room. I'm super excited to have everyone come out today. Would first like to thank Belmont for taking care of the room, bringing in extra chairs, which are actually needed, so I'm actually happy about that. And for Tech Systems coming out, bringing us coffee and food, you know, and the necessities in life. So I just want to quickly talk about Data Nerds. You see a handful of new faces here today. So Data Nerds is a data-focused meetup where we meet two types of ways. Obviously, this way is our monthly meetup where we have conversation leaders come in and kind of talk about different topics. The goal of this is to be more interactive. So if you have instances where you want to interact with Caleb, our speaker, please do. Which I just realized. Last introduction I forgot to do was Caleb Pagel. He works with CGI, and he's going to be our speaker today to talk about data quality. So thank you, Caleb. And then the second thing about Data Nerds and the way we meet is that we meet to kind of work on data projects together. And it used to be that we worked on Kaggle competitions, but I often found that that was not as necessarily engaging for people because then, you know, I'm gonna work on this Kaggle competition, someone's else gonna work on another one. So another approach I've been taking is instead to reach out to local nonprofits that are trying to kind of improve Tennessee and see if there's opportunities where they have interesting questions and data that we could help them facilitate. One group that we've worked with is Think Tennessee. They are a nonpartisan think tank focused on the economic prosperity of Tennessee. Their main thing is the state of the state dashboard where they rank Tennessee across the rest of the country in certain categories such as like access to broadband, registration, state of the workforce, stuff of that nature. We have established a partnership with them and we've actually already had one meeting. We have another upcoming meeting. So if anyone's interested in kind of working with us with Think Tennessee, please reach out to me and I'd be happy to get you added to our Slack and incorporate it in the project. And without further ado, I will let Tech Systems kind of come up.
Good morning. We are Tech Systems. Networks 2. Representatives out of the Nashville office. My name is Chris. Hank, this is Megan. We sit down in Franklin and focus within the really the data space in Nashville. So database development, BI, data science. That's kind of the niche that we're focused on both as recruiting here in Nashville, and we're glad to sponsor and help out. Cool to hear about the nonprofit project as well. So we're glad to talk about what we see in Nashville, around the country. We do move a lot of people through Nashville, much like a lot of other industries. Yeah, feel free to grab us if you want to talk about the market or jobs or background, anything that we can help with. We're glad to. So thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get going. I'm gonna give a plug to our joint meeting if I can.
Oh, I'm sure, absolutely. Go for it.
So September 25th is Wednesday night. NTSU is bringing in Kirk Bourne. Hopefully you know who Kirk Bourne is. He's from Booz Allen, Hamilton. The dude is crazy on Twitter. And he's really a keynote speaker across the country. He's coming in, and so what I did is just reach out to the meetups that I like to go to, which this is one of them, of course, and see if they want to come together as one. So Data Science Nashville, TDWI, and we got the data engineers, and then of course data nerds. We've already got 100 people signed up, and it's a fireside chat. I'll feed you food. I'll bring the booze. Yeah, I got some speaker dollars for it. So just come and we want to be more of a social event more than just a PowerPoint. So that's on the 25th. And I think Alex, you already kind of sent something out to everybody through Meetup.
I have, but I will send another thing. I mean,
we only can hold like another 20 people.
Oh, really?
You know how it is with meetups. It's 120 say, and then hopefully 60 show. I'm still happy to bring enough drinks for 20 people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
I'll
you.
keep advertising.
I appreciate it.
All right, okay. So thanks again to the sponsors in Belmont. I want this to be conversational. I have a slide deck prepared, but I want you to, if you have examples that you want to talk through to go through this process, if you have things that you're able to share from your clients or questions, you want to dig a little bit deeper, we can stop at that slide and spend the whole time on it. So, but I have all that prepared. I'm going to start out with just kind of an intro to CGI, so you have a little bit of context of how I work with different clients, and just a little bit of background about me so you understand why this is a topic that's important to me. We're going to talk about some examples that I've seen. Now, these are cleaned, anonymized, not giving any details away of client things, but they're actual things that I've seen out in the wild. So these are not made up. And then we're going to talk about how to identify and quantify data quality. What are the dimensions of data quality? How would you go about using it? Go ahead.
Can you give me a little background on what space you're in, what industry?
I have slides just on that.
Okay.
Yes, I will.
Sorry, I'm always taking it.
That's fine. That'll be the first step. And then we're going to determine a solution. You know, after you've identified and quantified, these are the things that are going on with my set of data, with what I'm looking at with this project. What can I do? And then actually implementing the solution, which is the most important part. And then we'll just talk about some action steps you can take right now, whatever project, whatever side project, we can go for that. So before we kick into that, just background on CGI as a whole. The company, if you're not familiar with it, it's a worldwide company, billions in revenue. We have about 77,000 people across the globe. It's a massive organization. We're in 400 different offices, 40 countries. We have 5,000 clients. We have some IP-based solutions. So if customers say, and are in the retail space, for example, we have built IP solutions that we can go in. That is a mix of what we do, and the majority of what we do is consulting. So partnering with people, partnering with clients and helping them in whatever way that means. So it varies from client to client. So big picture, and founded in 1976. So 40-year-old company, worldwide, offices around the globe. Most of the people that work there are called members because we're also shareholders. So it's this culture of ownership. I'm a consultant, but I'm also I literally own part of the company. So most of the people that work here also are invested in that. We have a high commitment to quality. We want to do things right. We do client satisfaction scores. We want to make sure after the project is done, what did we do well? So it's that commitment to quality just overall, in making sure that did we do what we said we're going to do. So we do surveys with our stakeholders before, make sure we understand what they want us to do, and then afterwards. We continue to follow up and say, would you recommend us, and those types of things. High client satisfaction scores and high client innovation scores, bringing solutions that they really didn't think of before or didn't want to go down that path, but we offer those types of things. So, questions so far? So zooming into the Nashville metro. So this is where I'm based, and this is my focus. It's basically a location-based model. I am interested in the Nashville area clients. If you've been around, who was here in Nashville before 2012? Just a few people, so a lot of new people. So if you were here back then, you may have heard of CTS. CGI and CTS merged a couple years ago, but if you're familiar with that name, it's really that same group of people combined with that larger CGI. And so we've been working with the Nashville area since 2012, 35 plus clients. So again, this is the Nashville area. So it could be north of town, south of town, in downtown, Brentwood, Cool Springs. And there's about 40 of us locally. Now we work across with other offices, regionally, those types of things, but there's 40 consultants that go out to the different projects. And we're really technology agnostic. So we work with lots of different vendors. whether it be Microsoft, open source, those types of things. But we're not behind a certain technology. We look at what the customer needs, what the client needs, see what path they're going on, and make the recommendations from there. We're also very involved in the community, obviously NTC, part of this meetup. WIT, very involved in that, so Women in Technology of Tennessee, and some of the other kind of government and other community organizations we're very involved with. So worldwide, but I'm focused on Nashville and Nashville clients. So zooming in a little bit more, a little bit about me. My background is technology. That's what I wanted to do. That's my education. Overall, just 15 years across different things. I was in software development for a while, doing business analysis. I kind of recruited and led a software development team in the SaaS space, and then doing data analytics now. So I've had the privilege and opportunity to work in a variety of industries, just by the nature of being in technology for 15 years. So healthcare, insurance, retail, manufacturing, utilities. So just had the opportunity to work across lots of different spaces and seeing that. Because of that, I've seen bad data in every single project that I've been on. And that's why I can say with confidence that whatever industry you're in, whatever side project, whatever you're doing right now, you have bad data. And I'm going to make you admit that during this course of this. If you don't already know, you have bad data in there. So questions about that? If not, I'll give you a couple of examples. So these are real examples, but protected the identity of the people so they're not changed. But let's say you have a large company and the products for that company are on a spreadsheet on someone's desktop, for example. And they said, it's perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. However, it's a spreadsheet. So the names are spelled wrong. There's blanks. Large is two different ways. There's NA. Sometimes there's blank. They got the spreadsheet from their predecessor. The predecessor put hyphens in there, right? However, that's the source of truth for all the items, right? So built in, you have that data. You've got data that you don't know what the history of it is, why it worked that way. If you're in the Salesforce space, you have multiple integrations. So let's say you have an integration with a ticketing system or a payment system. There are certain fields mapped in that integration which don't match your overall approach. And some are required there, some aren't required here. So you're ending up with this mass of data for customers, and holes are missing everywhere, right? So another example there. More traditional, and what I have more experience in is the database side. I think most people have access to some sort of data source. It's moving from on-premise to cloud. It's got multiple data sources. It's been upgraded 3 times. You've migrated other data in. There's problems there. How many folks in this room would consider themselves data scientists or working in the data science field? You are not immune from this by any means. So this bottom piece is kind of my just experience and work with Kaggle and some of the Kaggle data sets. So they have something like 65 gigs of anonymized chest x-ray data. So you don't really know who it is. You know a little bit about them, but they have different competitions or studies about, can you diagnose? Maybe there's multiple diagnoses. You know, maybe it's pneumonia and something else. So first thing I did was download all of it to my desktop. You can stop the judgment, but I just wanted to see what the x-rays were, because I'm thinking, oh, this is in the healthcare space. How many different ways could there be to do a chest x-ray? What else could be in there? So these are just some of the examples that I found looking through, because so you're building a data science model on focusing on one area. So moving different parts of the images. So if you've got a lateral view, for example, all of that goes away, right? You're building a model based on these 65 gigs of data, and you're building it on expectation and reality. So sometimes the orientation is wrong, right? How does that work with building a data science model for capturing what areas of that are Maybe there's some objects, they may have pacemaker, they may have other types of things that are throwing that off. I think as we go through, you'll see it's not necessarily bad data, they just make bad choices. No, but they really have expectations of what they think the data set's going to be and what your model should be. And I think it's just setting those expectations with your product owners, with your end users, that this is how it's made. If you feed me a X-ray image that looks like this, it does not apply, or these are the expectations. So any other examples that you want to throw out, we can throw through this process as we go along. If anyone wants to say something they're dealing with now, or wants to throw another option into the mix. If not, we'll go on. So when we walk into a client and we say, hey, we're here to help you, what can we do? These are some of the symptoms, some of the warning signs that you have bad data already in your process. It's, first of all, it's lost confidence data. So they have a set of enterprise reports, and you go to say, hey, we're here to fix your reports, and they're like, oh, we don't use those at all anymore. I have a spreadsheet that I have on I just send that to management, and it goes up. Warning sign right there, like something's wrong here. You've got this enterprise reporting system and then abandoned completely. What's going on there? Totals don't match. So you've got this reporting system, you've got completely different set of tool. Maybe you've got crystal reports over here, maybe you got some sort of cloud-based looker. None of the totals match, right? That's another data quality issue. You don't have a common definition of what you're trying to do. Where is this coming from? What's going on? Why don't these match? And so again, I don't believe in this. Or you have defects or tickets for missing data. Somebody who really knows it well ran your report and said, why isn't this agent or this customer or this person on this report? And that sets off a firestorm of what's going on here. I thought you were giving me production reports. And then the main issue, which I won't make a show of hands, but based on experience, zero documentation or incomplete or outdated documentation, or there's no data dictionary at all. What is a data dictionary? What's going on? These are all the symptoms, warning signs that you have a problem. You need to admit that you have a problem before we go on more. Any others that you've seen out in your workplace that you care to share? Let's talk about data quality dimensions, just at a high level before we get into details. So I chose this image. There's different definitions based on what site you go to, but there are different aspects of data quality that you can focus on. I'm going to really focus on the top two, which is completeness and consistency. Do you have all the data? Or if you don't, do you know what completeness you have? And consistency. Does this match with this? Or can you consistently produce that same total? There are other aspects of it, uniqueness. Is there a central source that you'll say, this is where we're going to get our data? Validity is you have a set of business rules that assumes that you have agreed upon a business set of rules. We won't dig into that, but that's not necessarily more advanced. It just takes more interaction, more thought with the people that are the data owners or the product owners. And then accuracy, which is a little bit more abstract thinking of, I have a set of data, I think everything's in there. Does this really reflect what I'm trying to do, right? So data is an abstraction of what's actually going on. So looking at your data set as well, is this accurate reflection of all the X-rays that have ever been done? Is this an accurate reflection of all of our products? Is there something that we're missing here? So those are different kind of high-level data quality dimensions. But from a completeness and consistency perspective, I hope we're at step one, admitting you have a problem. Two is, and those will be slides as we go through, we'll talk about each of these steps, is identify the source of truth. You're thinking, I already know where my data comes from. You're wrong. We'll talk about why. Then it's profile your data. Really look in to see what do you have from that source of truth, not what you think you have, not what people told you you have. What do you actually have in that data set? And then the next step is really the most important part, and really the meat of what we're going to talk about is the discussion and the documentation of what's there. That's the part that we see most often is just missing. There's no mutual agreement for what we came to an agreement, the assumptions we made, the cleanups that we did. What should this have? What shouldn't it have? The discussion and the documentation is the most important part. Pairing with your product owner, with your manager, whoever it is. And then mutually agree on a plan. And then the final is almost as important, which is continue to monitor your.
Oh, sorry about that. Your site's my stupid notification.
Okay. Continue to monitor after the fact. So once you've got this in place, you have to continue to look at it. You don't just say, oh, I profiled my data, I'm done, that's it. No, the monitoring is the second most important part. Okay. I'm just gonna vamp for 20 minutes.
So Caleb, I got a
Yeah,
question.
go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So who is responsible, in your opinion, for validating the completeness?
That's a good question. We,
In what perspective are you looking at? Is this from the data scientist perspective?
I think it's from a consultant's perspective. We'll talk about the different roles and who is responsible for what. It's not a one size fits all. It really depends on the organization. It depends on who has the capabilities to be a data steward from the IT side, who has the position to be, I own this data, right? Data owner. Who has the business data steward. That may not be the same person as the data owner, right? It's those different types of roles. Sometimes one person is all three. It just depends on the size of the organization. But those are the types of functions that you'll have to do. We as consultants typically help them identify that person or give them reports to do that function or set them up with some sort of cadence, some sort of documentation to do that on their own. So benefit those. So, but we'll talk about the specifics, at least some of the roles. And if you've got others, please jump in if you've got an idea for those types of things. But
One quick question.
go ahead, yeah.
Are we going to talk more about the documentation piece?
Yes.
Or, okay, so I'll leave it for that.
Yeah, all of these have slides later on. So prepare your question.
Gotcha.
Get ready. So again, identify, profile, discuss and document, mutually agree on a plan. Not IT does something and no one knows what happened. Monitor your data going forward. Okay, so first step, again, you think I'm making this up, but it's real from somewhere in the Nashville area. There's a person who has a spreadsheet. They have been doing it for 30 years. They are the owner of this magical process that only they know how to do. They are the source of data. That gets loaded into an Access database. It also gets dropped on a network share. Somebody picks it up and does some more things that you don't know about with it. And it turns it into a CSV that gets loaded into the transactional system. This runs calculations that runs back to this Access database, right? Where's the source of truth here? Is it here? Is it here, right? That's a source of truth. There's some transactions here happening right into that. So there's two sources for this. This is the problem, right? First is one of the documents we'll talk about is data flow. I think if you put this in front of someone, they'll say, yeah, we've got our bulletproof production system. They don't know the actual inner workings of where things come from. So just having a visual document that you can put in front of IT, business folks, anybody can just look at this and glance and say, oh, is that what we do? Is that what's actually going on? I don't know. What are your thoughts? What's the source of data in this specific scenario?
Well, there's two sources,
Two sources.
because you
Okay.
have, and if you think about people as models, they're in themselves a model. They're taking some input data, they're processing it, and they're spitting out an output. So you effectively have two models that are putting data into two data sources.
Right?
Oh God, it hurts.
It's painful because it's true. Go ahead. Get something. Okay.
I was gonna say, who's asking? Like, if I'm a person looking to invest in the company, I want to know the output of the transactions. I may not care about anything else.
So the source for
If I'm a compliance officer, I may care about further in the process.
Yeah, if an auditor comes in and says, show me the actual, prove to me that this is correct, you may have to give all those pieces. Yeah. So I'll leave that one out there. That's for you to discuss. But that's first step is to make the flow, right? And then talk about, here are the things that happen. If I wanted maybe just this element, if I want this element, this is the source of truth. If I want this element, this is the source of truth. There are multiple ways to find it, but it's those types of discussions. Think about what, there may just not be one database that's perfect. It's multiple sources of data. What is the true source of data? So, side note is environment management. So that data flow was the production. You may be in a scenario where you only have a production environment, but most likely you have production and then some other things. There's dev, QAT, SIT, UAT, pre-prod. I've heard all the different types of things. First is confirm prod. Do you know what prod is? Typically that's an easier one. And then identify all the non-production environments. So before we get to the step of we're actually profiling data, you say, oh, well, you can use our UAT. Well, UAT hasn't been refreshed in 3 years, and it's got old business rules, and it's got all these types of things. You need to know all of these environments and know what they do. And the expectations, should it be refreshed? Is this a place for you to do long-term data scenarios on fake data? Is that the purpose of this environment? Know which environment you're talking about and have an expectation of what is dev, what is UAT, who's in it, what are they doing in it, those types of things. So this is the way I feel when someone just says, oh, it's in our prod data, don't worry about that. I just have that internal Willy Wonka feeling. So when you've done that, when you've identified the source, first, if it's production, please get permission before you just take all of the data in the middle of the day and look through it. But these are some of the things that you're looking for. So again, CGI is technology agnostic as a whole, but I'll just mention some of the tools that are available. Informatica data quality is a specific subcomponent of all the Informatica suite of tools that creates profiles for you. You may just do Databricks. You may just dump it all out and I want to do a bunch of analysis and do my libraries and do some Python kits on it. That's valid as well. SQL is really what I've used in almost every project. It really drops down to, I'm going to create my own queries. I need to look at this. They said this, but I need to look at this. Knowing the SQL language, I don't know where you are in your career, if you're just coming out, I still recommend having a deep knowledge of writing your own SQL. And if you're further into your career, you still have to fall back on it. It's something that you use all the time. So any of those tools to profile the data, but what you're looking at is field fill rates, right? So you have millions of rows, 50% of them are blank, row counts. You told me that there was 5 million rows in here, there's 200, right? What's going on here? Cardinality, right? Someone says, this is the unique patient ID. They're repeated, there's only 3 of them. What's going on here? Null count, right? And null count is not necessarily immediately wrong, right? That's part of the documentation. Is null bad? Don't make that assumption yet. It may stand for something. It may not be the right thing, but it may stand for something. So don't just assume when you find a null, is that the same as blank? Is that the same as a 0? Is that right? You're looking just to see what's in there. That's the purpose of data profiling. And you're checking the assumptions of the key fields. So if someone says, we have the last 6 years of patient data in here. You do a simple query, it's like 3 months, right? These are your testing validations, your testing assumptions. And when you're presenting this back to the data owner or the project manager, it's very important to cite specific examples. We're not talking in abstracts. We're not talking in your data hierarchy and tree, right? We're talking about, I'll show you an example of where this is happening. look at this patient ID, they can look it up in their transactional system, and they say, hey, a link's broken here, right? The data set that you're getting is actually fed from this system, but something broke in that link and you didn't get everything, right? Site-specific examples. That's the whole purpose of data profiling, is getting real answers, not just, I think this data is good, it's in prod, we've had it for a while. Profiling data. Questions on that? Put an example, data quality reports are great to do, and there's something that you'll use maybe later on. It may change. This is just an example that it is not from a client. This is just one that I found. I'm just giving a visual for it. But you may have things like just record counts. Is it loading every day? What is it over time? What are our largest pieces? How many are blank? How many are null? It may not have even visuals. It may just be almost more like a spreadsheet, but you can give real examples of this is your data and present that as this common language. And that's really the most important part, is the shared understanding. Review with the stakeholders. Don't wait until you've built an entire data science model and it predicts with whatever accuracy to find out that your assumptions were wrong. That you should be looking at this data set, right? This is before you do that, you present the data profile, what you've had, and then write it down. 90+% of every customer that I've worked for, either not as a consultant and as a consultant, doesn't write anything down at all. It's just there. It just exists, and it's in someone's head, and they retire, and they're on the beach, and you're there crying internally. Write it down. And sometimes, and we've been in a situation where you're writing it down for yourself, right? It's not only for the next generation, but if you're writing it down for yourself, you get called back in. Hey, you did great work. We would like you to add on to this. I forgot this. I don't know what I did 4 years ago, right? It's benefiting everybody. Just write it down, what you've done, all the assumptions that you did, what agreements that you came to, and have it in a place where people can get to. It's not on your shared IT dev, IT data scientist subfolder, right? It's a place where everyone can get to and look at. So some of the documentation, I don't know if you have specific questions, but I'll go through some of the things that I expect to have. One is a business glossary. And you can find these online depending on what industry you're in. But this is a client-specific business glossary. When we say this, it means this, or our expectation is it has this. So let's say you're in an insurance company and you want to know the accrued interest rate, right? Seems like a pretty basic thing. But they may have rules of accrued interest rate to us means after the waiting period, right? So even those very basic business definitions should be a common shared understanding. And that's typically just doesn't exist at all. We typically have to build that or pull people together or have conversations and have meeting summaries and write it down before we can even start to pull that together and agree upon it. Data lineage. So this is where you say, it shows up in the report as this, it goes through this middle layer, it's called this. Here are the pieces that functionality that happen in the middle, and this is the true source. You've already identified your true source. You've got traceability all the way through. If someone questions you on this report, you know all the way back to the source. You can do this in different ways. It can be as simple as a spreadsheet, but it needs to be accurate and it needs to have the full lineage of where this field came from. So it's typically a field level data lineage. Data flow diagrams we talked about already, which is just more of a high level of what are the systems involved and what direction does the data go? Is it two-way? Does it loop? What's happening here? And then ETL and cleansing documentation. This can take many forms. It depends on what tool you're using. It depends on what's going on there. But this is really not necessarily just for the jobs themselves, so you know how to run them, but it's here's what you told us to do, and here's what we're doing. Each night we are dropping all of this set of data because it doesn't fit. You told us it was bad, or we're keeping it, but we're changing the nulls to -1s because you told us to, whatever it is. All of that actual ETL work. All of those are. So those are some examples. Any of this?
So when you're working with clients, so every company I've worked for, documentation has always been an issue, and that's kind of the biggest thing for me because there's so often, right, you're in an office room and someone says, oh, there's documentation, like I'll ask a question, why was this decision made about this reference material? Why does this exist? Oh, that's documented somewhere. Well, I'll ask, well, where? Oh, it's somewhere on the shared drive.
Yeah.
Tiers.
Just
Yeah, or it just doesn't exist.
Right.
And that's something I just struggle. Even though I've switched to data science from data engineering, I still kind of try to push us in that direction with some success. I'm curious, what are some techniques that you use to kind of sell your clients on the importance of documentation?
It's always a struggle, I will say that. So they're like, I'm not paying for documentation. But I would say that tools sometimes do help. Okay. So we've had good success with Confluence, for example. Yes. It's very friendly to everyone. You can lock it down to different groups if you need to, but when you talk about something that's easily updated, I'm not in, for example, I'm not saying SharePoint is bad, but SharePoint is more document oriented. And Confluence is more, not necessarily wiki, but quick readable explanation that you don't feel cumbersome of how do I update this. So sometimes it's tool based, but I think the most important thing is find what your company uses to be the common workspace across everybody. What can everybody get to? And again, it doesn't have to be the data, but it's the documentation of the data, and leverage that to say, always go here. One thing I've done recently is in reports, there's actually a link to the report documentation on the report. So it could be as simple as that and wherever it lives. It's whatever you can do to tie what they're seeing and when they're seeing it with, here's where it actually works. And so being a data scientist doesn't elevate you above the murky murk, right? You still need to have this foundational knowledge of what am I building this on? And now I can with confidence say, I built this model that predicts within 90% accuracy that this person has this disease, and it works in this parameters. Only give inputs of this type because it was built this way. Or if it goes this way, it may not be as accurate. So you can have that confidence to say, I built something, it's in a black box, I don't really understand it, but there's 90% accuracy, and it was built on this set of assumptions. It was built on this set of data. It was built on this premises. So those are some of the types of things. There's not a one size fits all. It's that we go in and we have a conversation. And we say, this is what we see. Would you like to use this tool? Or would you like us to leverage what you have? We're going to put it here and we're going to continue to update it. The most important process is to continue to commit to that. And we'll talk about how to do that.
And so one thing that I think maybe I'll air my dirty, I think Axial struggle with documentation is that some of the documentation templates used to be very intense. There was 20 different things that had to be filled out.
Right. And
it was just very cumbersome, and then just then no one started really engaging on it. So I've taken the approach of I try to distill it down to 5 important things, and then English speak, what's the use case, stuff of that nature. But of course, at the risk of losing it, I'm not capturing everything that the 20 kind of thing would have captured.
Yep. So inaccurate documentation is worse than no documentation. However, a little bit of trusted information is better, right? So I've seen what you're saying, which is we have a template. We're a giant bureaucratic organization. We have lots of templates that you have to fill out, and we use those. So sometimes that's a constraint of the organization. We can bring in templates and say, this is the template to use for this type. Again, it depends. It depends on what the agreement that you come to. The lowest entry of barrier of writing it is what you should choose. If you have an option, just say, this is what it takes to actually put in the documentation. And then again, ease of access. Not only ease of putting it in, but ease of access to get out there. It just depends on your situation. If you're saying it's locked down and this is the way your organization works, find a way that will meet those requirements, but will still, or just say, that's fine, I'll use it. Here's the amount of time that it will take. Or here's the expectations for, I'm going to have to build that into, if you're doing Agile, I'm going to have to build that in as a task for this, because it should be part of every task that you do. It's actually building it in and saying, I need to document this. I'm not just going to build it and then it goes to prompt. So,
And also update your documentation.
yes, there's a very strongly worded slide later on. Okay, so who's going to do this? Data steward. So I don't know where you are with your organization. I'm imagining that you may not have somebody that's called a data steward. I broke it down. If you look out on the web, search this, there's lots of different definitions. I broke it down into 2 categories, just for the purposes of this discussion. A technical steward who's really involved in, I need to make sure these jobs run every day. I'm making sure I'm reporting any outages, errors. Is there an update on the source system? Is there something happened we had an outage in the cloud, or whatever it is. There's a technical steward. Their job function, their job role is to really focus on part of what their daily job duties are expected to do that. Not just if you have time, can you check on this? Their manager, the business owner, whoever it is, has said, you are the technical steward. It is part of your daily activities to check, to make sure that this runs every day. There's also a business data steward, right? This person is critical. They know what that data actually means. They can say, oh, I see that's showing up now. What happened was, in this zone of our business, they started putting the data in wrong. And we talked to them already. That's fine. It won't happen again. They can actually do something with that data. They can interpret the data. Sometimes from a data scientist side or from a data engineer side, all you see is the end result. The business data steward is someone who can interpret that. They know what it means. They have deep, deep business knowledge, industry knowledge, and they can say, I know what this means. Do this with it. So you typically have a report or some type of outlier or error report that you can use to go back and say, here's the outliers based on the rules that we discussed. And as you find new rules, you may put it in there and they can take action on it. Again, it's part of their daily activities. It's not like, if you have time, can you check this report? They are expected to look at this outlier report, and they have the authority to go back to the source system and say, please stop entering in customer data in Salesforce without email address, or whatever it is. They can go back and do that and make the changes that are needed. So these are the 2 people that are going to be involved in, and they can be documentation too, but they're specifically involved in just shepherding the data along and being a daily activity or more of making sure that the data flow is correct. This is typically a new concept. So if you have not seen this in your organization, that's fine. Sometimes we introduce this concept as we come in with the project. But I encourage you to look around, look it up, see what fits. It may be this is one person, right? You may have a small organization, they're data in business, and they have to go be business analysts. Or you may have one that's 2. You may have a team of both of these people, but these are the people that you are going to count on so that you don't get back in the situation that you were at the beginning of this project, which is nobody knows what's going on, right? There's somebody involved along the way. And they're involved in lots of different things. Row counts, right? At a high level, are we getting, right? One day we get down and there's 15% less, like what's happening here? Something's not right. Errors, right? Job errors, either emails, whatever it is, missing key values, right? You decide this dollar amount is one of the key fields. If this drops, something's wrong, right? And why does it happen? I put a couple examples there. Everything happens to the data, right? That's why you monitor. There could be upgrades along the way. The vendor could upgrade. The database could upgrade. The DBAs don't tell anybody. They take it down. They upgrade the OS. Whatever happens, the purpose is you're monitoring it and you're checking up on it so you know when that happens, so that it doesn't show up on your end user and they say, this report is garbage, I can't use this. You already know before it happens because you're watching the data flow in. You can explain whatever means necessary. You can send an email out to say, report users, hey, just so you know, please stay out, we're correcting this issue. You're preventing it before it gets to the point where I won't use your tool or your reports. You're monitoring, you already know. It's proactive versus the VP of data and the VP of the business are at it, and then it trickles down, right? So you're taking a proactive approach. There was a question on here, or there wanted to be a question on continuing to measure. Jay, did you have something you?
I have a lot of.
Do you have a lot of
commentaries.
comments?
Yeah, so I'll hold on until you're done your slide.
Okay. All right. So I put a strongly worded slide in all caps here. Continue checking your data. That's the most important part of this whole thing. Continue to monitor, continue to look at it. This is part of the overall project. Make sure that you're using reports if available. Make sure that you're communicating. Make sure you're updating the documentation using data stewards. You're talking with your product owner, you're working with your data owner, whoever it is. Continue checking all along the way to make sure your data is correct so that you have confidence and your users have confidence in the data. So I have a summary slide. Are you ready to unload here, or you want to go?
One thing I will say is not only checking your data, but one thing that I found very successful was alerts. So I actually used to, back when I was a data engineer, I built into my ETL pipelines text messages. So if something went out of whack or a source that's supposed to be loaded on a given day didn't load, I would get a text message, or also had option for email.
Right.
So that's kind of, for me, it's good to have a dashboard, but it's also good to have some sort of way that if you're going to be notified that no matter what, you should get that information.
And that could be, is it an outlier report or text or email that you get? That's up to you, but whatever mechanism that you should use or whatever organization uses, set that up as part of, I need to take action on this, not just good data, but specifically what is out of alignment, what is out of the threshold.
So I will make a comment on that, is that who actually gets those notifications and how deep does it go within the organization?
So it always depended. For me, if it was an operational issue, I mean, I got every notification because if there was a data problem, I wanted to know, my boss wanted to know, but there were some instances where we would notify operations, like if they messed something up in our system, and there were some instances where if it was critical enough, like they would be emailed every 15 minutes until they fixed it. So one time it was kind of funny, someone messed up something on a Friday afternoon and someone came in with, I don't know, 150 emails that Monday morning because it notified them every 15 minutes. But that was the point of it. Like, the information needs to go to whoever's relevant. Now, a lot of this stuff mostly came to me because if one of our third-party vendors changed how they formatted a date field and my process broke, the VP of Ops doesn't care. Like, that's just on me to get through, make it fix. But for operational stuff, I'd absolutely make sure to get to operational people.
Yeah, that's important too. So that goes back to the business data steward versus technical data steward. If a DBA is getting a text alert that something's wrong and he can't do anything about it, that's not the right people, right? You need to alert the right people that know what's going on, can interpret it, and can go back and fix it, right? Or if it's something that I need to upgrade the database, the business data stewardship. So it should be IT internally fix it and communicate back out. Here's what we fixed. It's resolved, or there will be a hole in the data, or whatever it is. And just communicate that out backwards. So it depends on, from an organizational perspective, it really depends on who's available, who's assigned to it.
It's all about ownership.
Ownership, right.
It's all about ownership.
So empowering, so you may have data owners, you may have product owners, that could be, or data product owner. And they are in charge of communicating out to the business, right? They're kind of the base of your project. Sometimes it falls on them to be that liaison. Sometimes it's shared among multiple departments. And so you have more of a data set ownership. This is the group that's in charge of this data. So from a manufacturing perspective, let's say, this is the group that owns this stamping, right, procedure, right? And you've identified these people are in charge of this data set. And then maybe there's a different set of group that's working in a different manufacturing plant somewhere else that's involved with that data set. You've identified those people. It just really depends on organizational perspective of who can take action, who cares, and how can you move forward with continue to document. So ownership is very important, but allowing people to have access to do things and have that transparency is even more important, so they can take their actions. So next steps, what you can do right now for your project: identify source of truth. If you haven't done that already, you should do that. Document the current state, whatever it is, bad or good, document what it is. Partner with the business or data owner. Communicate, here's what I found. Agree, mutually agree on what we should do. Assign people, owners, data stewards, to be in charge of that, and give them the tools. Give them the tools to be alerted, to look at what they need to do, and to move forward with your data on an ongoing basis. So that's all I have. If you want to continue to contact us, questions about CGI as a whole, or me, or want to continue talking about data and have a sob session of the data that you've seen, connect with me on LinkedIn, or if you have any questions now, that's the last of the slides here, but anything else that you want to talk about? Concerns, questions, comments?
I'd like to also note that Caleb is in our kind of group Slack, so if anyone's interested in joining our Slack, and we have tons of conversations there, but you can also hit Caleb up in there.
Yes. I'm on side.
I'm curious, are you sharing the slides with data nerds apps, or I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I mean, I emailed you, so.
Yeah, I have the
post it-
slides, so I was gonna ask, but yeah.
Sure,
You
yeah, you
just
can post it
confirm.
on Slack or. Yeah. Okay. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
So,
And,
would you say that the seamless data is the dirtiest data?
No.
You would?
No, I would say the dirtiest data I've dealt with is CRM data.
Really?
Oh yeah, just
Internally developed?
no. So Salesforce CRM data, but just whenever people are having to interact with customers or people and they're having to enter in data, it's a hard job. And I'm saying it's the ugliest data I've worked with, and it's not a criticism. It's a hard job what they're doing. They're having to talk to people, make notes, try and make those kind of, whether it's a sale or if it's a patient call, it's a lot to have to juggle. Like, oh, this is my next talk track item. But what that results in is, because they're having to multitask so much, is that it ends up in bad data. So I would say that's been the ugliest data I've worked with. What about you?
That's a hard choice. Which of your children is the most ugly? It's like,
Well, I would say the CRM data was one of the hardest to work with.
Yeah, Salesforce. Well, I'm doing a project with a nonprofit right now, and sometimes it's because of the integration tool,
Yeah,
and so
that's true.
and sometimes it's just lack of training of how Salesforce works, and so you've got two things you're working against, and also you're on the phone with somebody. You're trying to work really quick and capture as much notes as you can. They're not required fields because you want the customer experience to be good, so it's very loose. And then they say, we've got a ton of duplicate contacts in here, and it's just the first name. It's like, well, you can't do anything with that, right? So you've got to put some guardrails up, and you've got to change your integrations, or you've got to change your process on the front end, and then you can use whatever tool you want to make sure you have 3,000 recruits, or 3,000 contacts, or 3,000 donors, whatever it is.
And I'll say from instances, yeah, CMS does have ugly data, but it is consistently ugly. So I would take consistent ugly data that I can understand and write a process to intake it, do something with it, and then put it into a cleaner, more usable format than unknowns.
And they, on top of that, they actually do have documentation down to the data field, data type level. So it's, like you said, it's consistent and it's documented, but
It's
you'll have to
changing.
do a lot of transformation on the back end side.
And it
depending-
changes. You know, the whole
Oh,
coding
yes
system
and no.
is changing.
Yes and
Well,
no.
the
Yes
whole
and no.
insurance coding system is being
The
expanded
ICD,
by order of magnitude.
you're talking about the ICD.
Yeah, all that.
Oh yeah, we switched from 9 to 10, and then I think there's an 11 coming out in the next few
So, you
years.
know,
But it's all documented, and yeah, it's effort. But I'll take ugly, like I said, I'll take ugly known data that I can work with than unknowns, because that's right. How do you reconcile all those duplicate, customers? Which I did not realize how hard a problem that is until I had to deal with it.
Yeah.
And wow, determining that two customers are actually the same customer really hard, especially when you have two customers that have similar names. So then you have to go down to other pieces of information you have, and they may be the same person, but two agents entered them in, so they have two slightly different addresses. So then you have to come up with business logic for thresholds of like, okay, they have the same name, the same address, and their same name, first, last name, same birthday, and their addresses are 60% the same.
Right.
You know, maybe, yeah. So it's, I don't know.
So one topic that I'm really interested in, and you didn't have enough time to really touch on it, and unfortunately I can't stay much longer, is the whole idea of monitoring your data. One of the problems we have is once I build a model and then I send it out in the world and let it do its deal, after about a year or so, I do wonder, is the data that I'm now getting, does it look like the data I trained on?
Right.
And so I had some ideas, but I would love to hear some feedback from you all on that. I don't know if that might be like a separate conversation, or if anybody has any like 30-second solution, which is ridiculous. But that is something I'm very, very interested in. I have some ideas, but I'd love to hear what other people think or have done with success or not. So with that, I mean, I think I have to say I have to go. I know I just dropped that.
I would love to, so we have something called penny chats, and I would love to have a conversation. I'll reach out to you and let's set up a penny chat, because I think there's a lot of people, I think about this a lot. It's something that I'm kind of coining, like creating inference pipelines that has data quality built into it, where you're checking like, because it's not, to me, and I know you have to go, but to me, the more complicated aspect of this is that you're not just doing null counts, you're not just doing row counts, you're doing distribution checks.
Right, I want to know central tendency and spread.
Right. Is your population change? Like, are you, did it used to be 40% female, 60% male, and now did that swap?
Right.
Those are a lot of, that's what makes it a much more difficult problem than like traditional like data quality.
So
Yeah, I'll reach out.
That'd be
I
great.
was gonna say, go back and ask your owner, you probably did that.
Go ask my owner. I wish I knew who my owner was. I mean,
Well,
my data comes from 180 facilities.
right.
I don't
But
have
who is
unknown.
actually using it?
Me.
But you're building this model and then sending a report out, or you're doing something with that?
I'm making predictions on risk.
Yeah. So it goes back to the stakeholder, whoever really gives your data at the end of the day.
Not really, actually, that's.
It becomes complicated though, because when you push a model out to production, you own that model, and if it
Right.
starts giving bunk inferences because the distribution of the data change or
Exactly.
they
So-
change business logic, yeah.
Right, and of course, one solution is every 6 months I rebuild my model. And I mean, and that's valid, that's totally valid, but do I wanna take the time? No, I'm doing other things now. You know, I don't mean to like abandon my model / child, but I can't always babysit them.
And there's been, I've heard of some instances where people talk about automated model retraining after a certain
Right.
period of time.
Right.
So that's other
That's a
things.
little frightening, because I would never wanna release a model I didn't get to look at.
No, I absolutely.
And
understand
not from
that.
an ongoing perspective, but from a documentation perspective, you can say model last trained on this, right? So even just having that, I release a model to production, it is based on these assumptions. This set of data from this time period, the model was trained as of this moment. You can just have that line in the sand and then decide what's next for that. If someone else, if another if you're training a junior data scientist and they come in, say, here's what happened, here's the assumptions I made, here's how I built it, you can take it from here and read and see if all those assumptions are still true, right? But just as you release a data product, describe that data product.
Yeah.
How did you get
And
to where
again, for
you?
me, that's a central tendency and spread.
Yeah.
In, you know, sort of continuous data, obviously that doesn't work for sex.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
you know,
color of eminence.
I'm guessing that a lot of your model building is, you know, sort of trying to pick the right algorithm, do parameterize correctly and all that stuff. But, you know.
But even if I hold that constant, if my data
I'm
shifts.
not suggesting that you do, but, we don't tend to, you know, at least in my limited experience, you know, we do that, we get a good result, and say, oh, God, that's really good. But we don't take sort of a test-driven approach.
You don't personally, or
I try to.
I won't.
In which, you know,
talk about me.
I make changes, no, certainly not, but, you know, making changes along the way and trying to introduce testing as I go, so that I can, and have that testing and it's automatable. You run a test and you get the report of whether it's still working. And maybe something along those lines. could be
Yeah, so
incorporated.
I think the nuance is my model is still working. It's still working. It's not blowing up. It's just dealing out probably suboptimal
Right.
risk scores.
Yeah.
So it's subtle.
Yes, exactly.
And
As
it's,
you
and
say,
it's
you don't have time to
drifts
go
over
back.
time.
You don't have time to go back, or at least, what if you
I
get
don't wanna.
something to alert you that
So
some
that's-
assumption is broken.
And that's where I'm like I've been thinking.
I'd
about-
rather it blew up, frankly,
Yeah.
and drift away.
And that's what I used to do. Is there were some instances where if I detect anomaly in the data, I stopped all data movement. Reports would not get updated, and I'd get a lot of probably unhappy emails. But I'd rather not send a report out, and people send me emails saying, "Why didn't I get my report?" than send out a bad report.
But, you know.
Same concept of models.
Right, and of course, bad is relative. I mean,
It is.
if my model is drifting, how do I decide now it's bad, as opposed to now it's.
And bad is like it
Sense
just
of
needs to be
acceptable
retrained,
variability. And you have to
Right.
figure out what that is.
and it may just need to be retrained because
Exactly.
it's not even bad.
Exactly. But as I move on, I'd like some measure of, hey, this is drifting, and it continues to drift. You might want to build into your workflow in the next month. You need to retrain this. But I need something to tell me your data is drifting.
I'll reach out and
Yeah, I
set up
love that.
something.
I love that. Thank you for welcoming me.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. All right.
I didn't mean to shut down the meeting.
No, that's
no, we're
no,
fast
no. We are 10 after. Anyone, of course, I don't think we're getting booted or anything.
No.
So everyone feel free to, we got some chicken wings left, there's coffee, feel free to hang out and chat, and thank you everyone for coming out. And like I said, if you are interested in working on our project or just tapping into our community, come to me, I'll get you added to our Slack, and yeah.
Short, so Charlie and I are both building data science programs at TSU and at Belmont, and we would just love to connect, and more importantly, connect you with our students in various ways. I mean, it's not just recruiting, not just do they need internships or jobs. I would love, you in our classrooms or with our student groups. I hate to speak for you, but I think that's why we're both here, is we just want to engage with industry. Take some time, and we're kind of in our infancy in both the programs. And anyway, we want our students to know who you are, what opportunities are, but also just ask interesting questions along the way. Anyway.
And we're both looking for opportunities for the two of us to work together to make more of a splash on data science in the community. So we actually just met for coffee a week ago, talking about ways we can change the world here in Nashville. So we'll do our thing, but we know being together brings more awareness to what we want to do. So
Yeah, we're not
any of
just
those ideas.
bashing heads, we
There's
have to
more
win,
than
they
enough
have to
students
win.
going around.
On that, are there opportunities to mentor for projects?
Absolutely. We do specific events, like, I call them data dives. We got another one coming up at the end of September, where actually Alex and Ray went to last one in March, where we had 50 students just get together, and we worked on 7 hours data. This time we're going to have a different set of data, and there's those kind of opportunities. We're trying to figure out how to do that more up in Nashville. That's why Glenn and I were talking, maybe do an academic conference.
I know-
One conference, I should say, something that's not really a conference in the springtime.
I know many of my coworkers work with Georgia Tech students on mentoring them with projects. We are also starting to work with Vanderbilt and MTSU. So any
Yeah, with us
opportunities with-
both starting new programs, those kind of opportunities
Yeah.
are very welcome now. Before it was, which students would you be mentoring? Now, Glenn, specifically this semester at Belmont, they have a data science program that started. So there's now going to be students, ours will start in the year. We have to go through 80 more approval processes when we publish, so we have a year to wait. But we have students now, that are very interested in help. And that's why for us, mentoring is kind of a hard thing, because you don't want to commit yourself for a year or 4 years. But that's why sometimes it's easier to do events and say, come on in, sit down with the data set and work with students as opposed to in front of students. And those are really good opportunities. I mean, you guys have, have had those opportunities to do that. And then if you want to do more after the fact, that's great, but you're not committed. And so that's why we're trying the idea of more hackathons to get you started and then see what kind of commitment you'd like to make after that.
I've also seen at Georgia Tech specifically, I'm a Georgia Tech graduate myself, so we had capstone projects in which people could come up and work for a semester-long project with them, give them their data, and this is the problem that we're solving, try and solve it together.
Yeah, I know we both will have that. It's just when you start a program, you don't do the capstone the first year. You gotta wait a little bit, and so I know you're probably a year or two away from.
Right, for sure. So this is our first one. I'm teaching Intro to Data Science.
Okay.
That's our only course. Next semester, there will be a couple of other courses, and it will take us about 2 years before we'll have a capstone course.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly the type of thing we're doing right now, working with data nerds and Think Tennessee to hopefully push, maybe not in the classroom, but those students that seem to have the energy to come on Tuesday mornings and work on projects with data nerds and Think Tennessee. It's an excellent opportunity.
And just to kind of plug data nerds for a bit, we do have a lot of members that are willing to break into data sciences. So if you have people or people that are interested in being mentors, we have an endless supply of people that would love to be mentored. And we don't even approach it from necessarily you have to make commitments to mentoring, but if you just have people willing to get coffee just to talk about data science and help people, that'd be hugely helpful. I have Think Tennessee as one project, but I'm hoping to spin up more with other nonprofits. If there's anyone interested in working with nonprofits, with people, I'm always looking for people to act as mentors on their projects, especially as I have a lot of people interested in Think Tennessee. I'm personally realizing I probably need to take a step back and allow other awesome people to kind of mentor people on the project as I try and seek out others. So always looking out for more mentors there.
Charlie and we're talking too much, but Charlie and I talked at coffee or whatever, I can't remember when we met, but talking about, I would love Belmont and MTSU, places where data scientists can play. I don't know if that makes sense. Events like this, but also the hackathons or just coming and having discussions similar to Kirk Bourne, where we gather multiple meetups are coming and this is a place. I want you to know where this room is or know where other locations are. So this is where I come to talk and play in data science.
Yes.
Yeah.
And free parking, I can't believe it. We're not gonna get a ticket today.
Classes start tomorrow, so it may swell.
Well, but even still, you go down and there's elevators, so it's not like you get to park on level 4 that you're walking up 4 flights of stairs.